who played Ethel Kennedy. All the way to the end. We have Constance Zimmer, who played Messina Freeman. Naomi Watts, who plays Kennedy Onassis. Grace Gummer plays Carolyn Kennedy. Paul Anthony Kelly, John F. Kennedy Jr. And Sarah Pidgeon, who played Carolyn Bessette. We also have a special guest moderator tonight. His shows have had 345 Emmy nominations and 56 Emmy wins. I don't have to go through all his credits. I went through some of them before. My vote today for the mayor of Los Angeles, Ryan Murphy.
Hello. So, I sold Love Story, I believe 3 years ago today. That's how long it's been. Brad and Nina and Connor writing and Max Winkler directing. And I have not done a lick of press. So this is the first thing I've done to promote the show, and I wanted to tell you the reason I wanted to do this is to say thank you to this incredible cast who turned this thing into sort of an unexpected cultural sensation, which we did not think we were doing when we made the show. And also to say thank you to you guys and everybody who watched it and loved it and embraced it. And, you know, we had all lived with it for a long time, particularly me, but there's nothing more fun than to see something that sort of catches fire in the culture and everybody's talking about the same thing. And I love this show because of what it was about, which is a love story. It was optimism. And it made people feel good in a difficult time, I think, however difficult the subject matter was. So how we're going to do tonight, I'm told, is I'm going to ask the pressing questions you guys want to know and talk about where all the bodies are buried, which only I could do with this group of people. And then we're going to watch clips so you can see what they did. So I want to start with Paul.
Here we go.
And Sarah. This was a fascinating thing to cast. And I think, you know, we got the best cast in the world for these roles. The interesting thing about this show was what an absolute panic it was, because when Brad and I and Nina and Connor and Max were working on it, we thought the easy thing would be JFK and the hardest thing in the world would be Carolyn Bessette. It was the absolute opposite experience. Sarah was the second person who auditioned. We asked her to audition. She auditioned with jet black hair, fresh off a Tony nomination for Stereophonic, and as soon as she finished, she was so astonishing. I remember looking to Nina and Brad and Max and being like, well, that's her, right? We're done. And they were like, yeah, that's it. So congrats, you made our life very easy, and there was really no question after that audition. It was just undeniable, and I think you can tell we made the right choice. JFK Jr., however, an absolute nightmare. A nightmare. I think we read over 500 guys.
I thought it was 1,000.
Well, there's reads and pre-reads, so yes, by the time you get to the whole thing. And I think none of us were like, you know, we had cast at that point, I think, Sarah and Naomi, and early on in the process, and then we kept getting longer and longer, and we just could not find JFK Jr. We just could not find them, and Courtney and Nicole were so tireless. And so basically, we got very close to shooting, and I said, I think we need to move the date, because we just don't have him. And it's a very difficult role to cast when you're doing this, because you have to get somebody who kind of looks like that person and can embody a certain energy. So what Brad and I ended up saying is, bring us the headshots of every person who's ever auditioned for this role. And it was one of the greatest Hollywood moments in my career, because Courtney Nicole brought us this slush pile of headshots. And I was directing something else, and Brad and I were looking through my thing, and I got to Paul's picture, and I swear to God, I went like, what about this guy? Where is this guy? Did this guy audition? And it turned out that he had auditioned. And then it turned out that you had been trying to be an actor for 10 years.
Yeah, I was 13, actually.
13. So we looked at the tape, and it was, quite good. And sometimes that's the casting process, right? And so the next thing I knew, we flew Paul out to LA, and he walked on the lot with a geriatric rescue dog. And he was just what you wanted him to be. And he's tall and good looking and can act. And as soon as he walked in the door, I was like, please be able to speak. Please speak. And he did great. And I just want you to talk about a little bit, like, you must have thought we were insane. You also must have thought, like, wait, is this the moment I've been waiting for? And of course, we all know what happened to you after this show came out. All of you, actually, so beloved by the public, and so many more opportunities in your scene. And it was exciting, but talk about that audition.
Well, walking on the lot, just that in itself was like, oh, okay, here we are. The chemistry read with you. I mean, I think when we saw each other, there was just this instant bond, and kind of got it. I was there for the assignment. We both understood it. And then, we just built on that. But then the following day when we did the screen test, I had a blast doing it.
Were you nervous?
I was incredibly nervous, yeah.
Did you keep thinking this is not real after 13 years?
Now that it's done, still, I don't feel like it's real.
Yeah,
I'm still having so many pinch me moments every day. But through the casting process and being in front of the camera and that little makeshift set and doing these scenes with you, Sarah, was like a highlight of my life. Even just getting that far was like, hell yeah, all right, I'm here at Ryan Murphy Productions. But then when you told me I had the job.
well, that's part two, because we're setting up chemistry, right?
Sorry. Okay.
So this is how we set up chemistry. Like it's called love story. It's not called kind of love story. Like you either believe that they're in love or they're not. And that's something I love about actors, and I liked about the process of casting the show, because you cannot fake it. The great chemistry things between actors, the reasons why things become successful is you either have it or you don't. There's some times where you can fake it, but it's hard. So the best thing that we ever did is we finally got to the last thing. We screen tested Paul, and Sarah had the part. And Sarah's like, you can probably tell by looking at her, the coolest cucumber of all time. Really cool person. And Paul auditioned, and between walking up to the monitor and walking back to the office where I was, there were suddenly 15 women who had snuck onto the lot who were watching the thing. I was like, that's a good sign. So we pulled Sarah aside, and I said, what do you think? Because I wanted Sarah to choose. And Sarah said, it's Paul. And I said to her, you go tell him he has the part, which you did. Which is, I thought, was the greatest thing ever. Like, what a great Hollywood story. Like, you have this part, and it's so romantic. And can you talk about that moment between you and Paul where you went up to him?
Oh gosh, I've never had that much responsibility before in my entire life. And I think it was like 30 seconds between, I guess, backstage where you were and where you were getting demiked. So I was trying to figure out my plan, like, how do I deliver this news? And I think I sort of faked it. I was like, oh.
Yeah, it's not looking good, buddy.
Congratulations! And yeah, I think Max, you're here tonight. You recounted this to me, that Max looked at you and was like, congratulations, you look like you're dissociating.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I totally was.
But yeah, from that point on, I guess in terms of talking about chemistry, I feel like I've been asked a lot, how do you build it? And I don't know if I've had a good answer to this question yet, because I don't think it really is something that is like an equation that you can solve. But I think in a very similar way to Carolyn and John, you know, they had this moment where they met, which we explore in our show, and it just sort of is this indescribable feeling. And as Carolyn and John got to know each other while we were filming, what's your name? Paul. I know I'm calling you John. Paul and I got to know each other, and like, you know, obviously I have such love for you, and we've grown so close. And I think just through that and being in these scenarios with John and Carolyn, there was just something really unique and beautiful that was built. And the foundation of that was a trust in each other as, you know, not just actors, but as people, and just knowing that that Paul was always going to show up and really be just this grounding force with so much energy that was, you know, thrown back at me when I would throw you some crazy,
There were a few
stuff
curveballs,
sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah, but you can't fake that kind of relationship, you know. And when we were doing this, we were thinking like, oh, the great chemistry love stories that nobody would expect, like Redford and Streisand and Ally McGraw and Ryan O'Neal. It was just a beautiful thing to witness. So this is a scene from our pilot, which you will see. This was one of our first days shooting, and I remember this scene, what Max directed. It was kind of your meet cute scene. I remember we were there, and we were like, oh, okay, this is gonna work. So we can roll that clip number one. This way, when I watched that clip, I realized if anybody was looking at me, I'm like, oh God, I'm grinning like an idiot just watching them. And I did that from the moment I watched the first rough cut of this show. I remember just sitting there, it was like a balm. You know, because there's so many things out in the world right now, it's a hard time, and there's so many shows about fighting and murder, and I do half of those, so trust me. But I'm responsible for that. But I just remember from the first time I watched this with this cast, I also think there's something about the discovery of a young person in these roles that was so powerful to me. And it's a casting thing that I've done so many times. I'm a very famous person who told me I could never tell. His secret of success said, when you're doing something, you need to do three things. You need a new person, you need a legend, and you need somebody with something to prove. And that is a recipe of success. So we get to our legend part, which is Miss Naomi Watts. Naomi is not like this, but I call her 4 for 4 because I've done 4 things with her and they've all been big hits. I did The Watcher, I did Capote versus the Swans, for which she was nominated. I did All's Fair, and now I've done Love Story. And I have 2 questions for Naomi, who is just one of our greats, and always has been for more than 20 years. She classes up every endeavor and has such gravity as a person, and we all love her. But Naomi, you've been around the block for a long time. You've worked and you've had such great successes. Why do you think that this show, because you've had so many hits in your long, wonderful career, why do you think this show pierced the zeitgeist? What was it about it? Because when we made it, none of us thought it would become this, but why do you, somebody with so much professionalism and experience, what do you think it was about this that made people go so gaga?
Well, thanks for all that you said, Ryan, and thanks for inviting me to do one of the hardest things I think I've ever done, but we'll get to that. To answer your question, I think it's never one thing. It's a collection and a collision of many things. You've got the great story, a love story, which is a universal story that everyone can tap into if it's told right. This particular one ends in tragedy, we know that, so we can imagine the what if and who they were, you know, like there's so much that's compelling in this story. And then you've got this incredible group of actors, incredible words, beautiful, beautiful writing, filmmakers, you know, like the needle drops, the clothes, and the 90s. I mean, my kids and their friends are obsessed with this show. Who knew
know.
that, you know, yes, we're nostalgic for the 90s. We lived it.
Yeah.
We love to look back. But these kids know nothing. And they're obsessed with Sarah Pidgeon, with Paul Kelly, with Gracie Gummer, with Constance, you know, all of us. They love this show for all of those things that I just said. I think they tap into this magical love story, America's royalty. It's
When I was
just
working
done
on-
so well, and all of the elements lined up nicely.
To me, if I kind of distill it through one thing. My 13-year-old walked by one time when I was working. He's like, "Why is no one on his cell phone?" Like, they did not happen then.
We had pay phones.
Yes, and like so many
had
times
to
now,
line
we
up for it.
communicate in a very distant way, you know. And I like that this show was all of you having to have intimacy with no block, and I think we all long for that pre-cell phone world and a world of kind of, I don't know, I miss it. I think that there was something to that. Naomi was somebody who was our only choice for this role, like she is for almost everything that I offer her. And I've done it so many times, I call her up and I'm like, "Are you available?" And she's like, "Oh God, okay." Well. This was a very daunting role, but yet kind of not, because whenever I look at your career, the thing about Naomi is there's two things people don't know about you. One is you're incredibly funny, very funny, really good on 2 drinks, Naomi. But also just like, I think a pitch perfect ear for accents, which is a very hard thing to do, but you can do it. Can you talk about that and how you prepared to play Jackie Kennedy, arguably one of the most famous voices and mannerisms of any person in the last 100 years? How did you do that?
Well, I worked with a dialect coach, and this was when I said it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was because of that voice. We know that voice. It was a very specific voice and kind of cultivated on her own. Like, she spoke several different languages. She lived in different parts of this country. She had enormous different influences. So it was very, like, there were affectations to it that didn't feel that familiar and felt very specific. So, and she is arguably, to date, the most memorable First Lady. So we all feel like we own her, we know her. There's a line in the show, we grew up in people's homes, in their living rooms. So they feel connected to her. So that was very daunting to take that on. And I was like, "Are you sure, Ryan? Like, I'm not even American. I'm like, I don't look like her. I definitely don't sound like her, and I'm not American at my core. So does this make sense?" And you're like, "Yes, Naomi, yes, you can do it." And I worked with Jerome Butler, who I've worked with many times before, great dialect coach. And really it was about 2 things: capturing her essence, but yes, honoring that version of Jackie that we feel we've come to know. But this was at the end of her life, which we didn't know much about. She lived very much behind closed doors. She really made a strong effort to stay private towards the end of her life. And so I tried to make her voice sound like the endless video recordings and voice recordings that we pulled together. I mean, there's that fantastic interview that she does with Arthur Schlesinger just after the tragedy. And yeah, so you get the sounds from that. And then, towards the end of her life, she's lived through tragedy, she's lived through darkness and sadness, she's smoked a ton of cigarettes, probably drank a fair amount, and maybe some other things. And so you add in all of that texture that.
But you enjoy that process.
I love that process.
It, yeah.
I mean, rehearsal. I think every actor up here will tell you they love prep. It's so wonderful. It's both scary, but it's a way to, put your creative pants on and go, who is this person? How do I make this dynamic, and
Yeah.
what is her point of difference? What is her thing that is not like anyone else?
But for everybody else, like there wasn't a lot. Like there's a lot on Jackie to pull from. Like I don't think I ever heard Carolyn Bessette say anything other than yes. Like she was very savvy about that. So that was hard. And also, Paul, you listened every day to one thing, which was what? Wasn't it every day you listened to it?
Oh yeah, I listened to John narrates his father's book, A Profile in Courage. I listened to that religiously.
Really?
Yeah.
Did it
From
help
the moment
you?
I woke up in the morning to
Just-
while I was sleeping at night.
Were there certain ways that he spoke that you could imitate?
Right now?
just do it.
No.
Just do it.
Yeah.
No, but
there were
was
a
there
lot of
sound? Was
exercises.
it was a vowel sound.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm Canadian, so we have a tip of the tongue type of talk.
Yo,
It's,
yeah.
yeah, a lot of A's.
Okay.
But John spoke he was very lackadaisical. He used the middle of his tongue a lot, and he has this little bit of a lisp type thing. I'm trying to do it. It's not very
No,
good.
it's very good.
Okay. Oh, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I say. Okay, perfect. So listening to that, I also worked with Jerome Butler, who taught me how to use my tongue in a different way. And that sounded so nice.
So let's watch this clip. Now you know how these two talk and learn their accents. So this is Jackie talking about what it means to be a Kennedy with Miss Naomi Watts. Interesting about the show, it has happened to me a couple times in my career. The time before it really happened to me, and also to Brad and Nina who did it with me, was when we did The People versus O.J. Simpson. And everyone thought, oh, they probably are going to do some sordid murder tale, and that was never our intent with that. We had very strong rules about that show. We did not want to show any violence. We were more interested in, the Marsha Clark story, systemic racism, all that stuff. And what nobody knew about this show was we felt the same sort of carefulness and love about all of these characters. We worked really hard. Connor did in the writing, and Julie, who's here, and Max. Everybody who was involved in this was like, I would say honestly that our first role in making this was first do no harm. If you couldn't prove anything, if it wasn't vetted by like 4 or 5 or 6 people, we would not do it. And even then we're like, well, let's try and do the optimistic, positive things. So, Jessica Harper, you're a legend. You've worked for years and years and years. This is an example of casting, right? So when you're doing someone formidable, like I think Ethel Kennedy, we went to Jessica because she just has that stature as a person. And when you read, and this is something you can talk about because I think you would agree, we had a great love for these characters, behind and on screen. Everybody loved their parts and was very proprietary and careful, and I think more than that, respectful. There was a world where this could have been much more exploitative. We did not want to do that. We wanted to do the beautiful version of the story and talk about these individuals as soulful, beautiful people. Can you talk about your experience in playing this part, Jessica? And was it daunting? Was it hard? Or what was your experience?
It was, I think it's always daunting to play a character who's an historical character, and particularly one with the kind of depth and interesting character that Ethel had. So I wanted to be, the challenge was to be, obviously, to be true to her as I could be. And there isn't as much material out there about Ethel as there is, say, about Jackie. And so I had to dig a little deeper, but there's an incredible, Rory Kennedy made an incredible documentary about her mother. And there was a lot of footage of Ethel just sitting there talking, which was an incredible gift. Speaking of a gift, Ryan, I want to say thank you so much for putting me in her shoes, her Ferragamo shoes, for several weeks. It was incredible. And Connor wrote incredible pieces for me to tackle. And but she was a woman of really a nuanced character. She was a woman of her time in that she was shall we say, a stand by your man kind of gal. Like, for example, we know that some of those Kennedy men, avid womanizers, but she was a woman who believed that she was in an exalted position as a Kennedy wife, and that she needed to be a standard bearer. She needed to represent Kennedy values. And when it came to infidelities or other misbehavior by her husband and her husband's brother, she would look the other way and keep calm and carry on. But she also had a very deep morality, and went to mass. I believe she went to mass every day, and she and I think that's also how she coped with this incredible amount of loss that she suffered. I mean, she was the model of stoicism. The woman lost her own parents in a plane crash when she was 27. She lost, of course, her husband and her brother-in-law to assassination. She lost 2 sons of her own, and then, of course, there was this other tragic plane crash. And yet, and I hear her say this in this documentary of her, that she says, well, nobody gets a free ride. And I thought to myself, Ethel, I think that's true, but your ride may have been a little bumpier than most people's, I feel. So she's just this incredible, stoic and resilient and courageous, and a little bit of a sense of humor too.
Yeah, I think that she it's interesting because on the surface of what you think that the show is something else, but if you really sit with it, what it really is about, I think, is the power of sort of female resiliency in the culture. Really looking back on the 90s and how hard it was for so many women who either were unseen or misunderstood, Carolyn being chief among them. And what I loved about the show was just, with all of the relationships between the women it came about. And of course, what no one ever knows, which I just want to say publicly to everybody here, is, when you do a show like this, I come from everything from a position of fandom. Like, I'm just so thrilled by everything that you did. All of you, and so many times you don't know it, but we'd be working on an episode early on before the rest were written, and I'd see something you had done or a choice, and I would say to the writers, oh, more of them. So we actually, Jessica, when you shot things early on, and you were so good that we wrote more for you. So thank you for that.
Thank you
for showing up and working so hard. Here's clip number 3, where Ethel warns Carolyn that the whole world will be watching her. Question for all of you. Naomi, you and I were the only ones who weren't there for the wedding episode, which in a show like Love Story, that's the episode, right? It leads to it's the climax of something. And I just wanted everybody who was there, it was probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite episodes, because what I loved about this episode and what I loved about the show was that it really just embraced unadulterated sentimentality. It was very, very weepy. It was very, very beautiful. It was unvarnished. I thought it was such a beautiful episode. It always made me have deep feels. So starting with you, Sarah, and we'll go around. Naomi, you can talk about when you watched it. What was your memory from that episode? I'll tell you my memory, because there was a scene where you guys were outside giving your speeches, right? And I was like, our wind machine operator needs a raise, because the way that everyone's beautiful hair and that balmy Cumberland Island thing is moving, and I later found out that it was God who did that, not our wind machine person. It was like a lot of gifts like that, filmmaking, and I'm sure you felt it, that's just like chef's kiss, like perfection. But for you, that was my favorite memory of that episode.
My favorite memory is also on that pavilion, but it was watching Constance give her speech, the mother of the bride. That moment, I mean, that was just like a masterclass in acting, period. And I also think that as the relationship that we developed and understanding Carolyn and that moment in history, it's a part of the oral history of Carolyn and John's relationship. And there are if I'm correct, that there are moments that have sort of been recorded of like this warning of Carolyn not wanting Carolyn to marry John, or and to see it performed, I think gave so much clarity to their relationship, and I guess selfishly as the actor playing Carolyn, who Carolyn was because of the mother that she had. And it was this big, I think we did it a couple different ways, but there's a big crane that pushed across all of these wedding guests. And the wedding was so magical because we had 6 episodes to work with all these different wonderful actors and develop our own relationships with them and really feel the love behind this love story, and to have everyone be in attendance on this magical, windy pavilion in Long Island. I think the heirs to Sbarro owned the house, fun fact. I don't know if I'm allowed to share that.
Sure you are.
But there was just sort of this full circle moment, and then of course being in the chapel that they recreated so perfectly. I think that was, when I think about the wedding, I think about that moment, watching Constance give such a beautiful performance as Anne.
And Paul, your memory of the wedding?
My favorite memory of that was definitely in the chapel, I think, lit by candlelight, and just having all the cast members here there, except for Naomi. And the a cappella singer.
Oh my God.
He was phenomenal, and just, you could feel the love in that room. It was an exact recreation of the chapel that they got married in. We were in, not Long Island there, I think we were in Nyack.
Oh, were we in Nyack? I was pushing to go to Cumberland Island, but
That
I don't
would've been
think that
awesome.
was in the budget. it went to the music.
100% went to
Rightfully
York.
so. Soundtrack.
York, not cheap. Madonna, not cheap.
Yeah.
Gracie, what about for you?
I first of all was deathly ill.
You were?
Deathly.
Oh my
While shooting that episode. So every
weepy close-up was a real thing.
it was a real thing. No, but every take I was like, please don't shoot me out because I'm gonna die. Like I was really dying. And so I don't remember a lot. I really remember Constance's speech, and I coughed violently in the middle of her first beautiful oneer, and ran out and I think ruined the scene. But also, the chapel, it felt like the first time we were these people that went through this, and then they met their fate, and I don't know, there was something very just very real, and it was pretty incredible. And also Sarah, she had these crazy shoes that they were so high, but they were stilettos, but she couldn't really walk in them for the camera to get like a full-on, still of her walking. So you're supposed to see her walking like this, but she couldn't walk in her shoes, so she was like,
That is a good one.
okay.
Naomi, you
zombie.
You watched it. Is there a moment?
Oh, I would say a couple things. Firstly, when you use the word sentimentality, sentimentality, if it's not dealt with in the right way, it can kill something so quickly. It can be so cringy.
Mm-hmm.
But this moment obviously was so earned, and we really were just lusting for that, to feel like we were in the room.
Yeah.
And we did. We got it. You guys all achieved it, and it was the build-up. It was all of the talent of the words, the way the camera was moving, everything. So that's that, and all of these performances just broke me. But the shallow thing I'm going to say is if you did truly grow up in the 90s, you have her wedding dress in mind.
That's true.
For a decade.
And I'll tell you a fun fact about that. I had one note after I watched this cut, and I'm like, where's the dress?
Yeah.
And we went back and we picked up close-ups of almost like, I called it dress pornography, of Sarah in that dress and the close-ups of the fabric. It wasn't a zipper, it was like you slipping into it. Remember, we picked that
on the
up.
bias.
So I was like, that's the romance of it that so many people now are afraid to do. But I thought it was unadulteratedly, I wanted people to swoon, and you know, I think
We
people, you did. Constance, was your favorite moment your moment too, so then you'll win. I want you to say, my favorite moment was my speech.
My favorite moment was my speech.
Yay, good, okay, we settled that. I hope that's actually true.
No, it is and it isn't. I mean, the short answer, first of all, thank you. That's all very kind of you to say. But I do think for me, because I had only been in one episode up until that point, and it was only with Sarah and Sydney. So when I stood up at that table and I looked across all these actors and all of these Kennedys, and I mean, I felt like I want to believe she felt. And so for me, it was like when I stood up and I looked at all these people and I was like, I have something to prove, you know? And I'm gonna make these people listen to me. And that is what that felt like. And it was also, it went from them to her to him, right? So like, and that, I just felt that. I felt it like from the tip of my toes, like up into my throat. And so being able to have that, it was kind of genius. Like, you know, that's something you don't know it's gonna be like that on the day, you know? So.
Was that at like 3 a.m. that you shot that?
Yeah, it was definitely in the wee hours of the night. But I will also say that wind was pretty spectacular.
It was amazing.
Because it added this romance to it and this mystery. But I will say my moment with you, Paul, on the staircase and basically when I touched his hand and I was like, I know you believe that. You know, I was like, oh, there she is. Okay, there she is.
And Jessica, what about for you in that wedding?
Well, the most fun thing was I got to ride in the back of this old red pickup truck to the wedding in my elegant gold suit. And the only thing that kept me from bouncing into the very pitted road that we were bouncing across was a stunt Kennedy standing between me and certain death on this road. And I was instructed by the director to act like I was having fun. But the truth is, it was fun.
Yeah, I believed you were having fun.
Oh, thank you.
I just think the episode was so special, and it was made. I remember when we were working on it, having some brief conversations with. We just kept saying kind, make everything kind. Like it was just a feeling, an aura. So here's our extended clip of our wedding episode. What I love about that episode and that clip was you could just tell everybody who was making it, from the cast to the crew, everybody was just on the same page and knew what the animal was, you know? You can feel it. It's like so unusual. Nothing really changed from the moment I saw that rough cut to that episode. That's how, like, it was just like, oh, there you are. And then there's the opposite of this episode, which is the fight episode. I wanted to talk a little bit about that because, you know, I always like to tell people how the sausage is made. Sometimes when you're doing TV, you have interesting ideas. And I remember very early with Brad and Nina and Connor, I think I said something like, wouldn't it be interesting, because they did have a volatile relationship at the end that was well documented, but what I loved about them was that they were fighting for it, you know? They were still in it, and they loved each other. It was the fight which I loved about their love story. I remember saying, would it be interesting if we just do a whole episode where they never left this room? We've all had those fights. at our life, I think, particularly in the 90s. So I remember being really fascinated by that idea, and the thing that I loved about this was Julie and Connor and Brad and Jesse, our director. It's very rare to do this, but we did this on this episode where we workshopped it. And I spoke at the very beginning about giving Sarah Pidgeon agency and going in and saying, Paul, you're my guy. Like, what I loved about this episode was with our two leads, you got together on the weekends when we weren't filming the other episodes. You really gave a lot of your time and your energy for this episode, and you would sit and you would say, well, I think she would say this, because of course, who knows what goes on behind closed doors. And I thought that was such a beautiful, rare experience for actors to be able to do that and work with the director. So could you two just sort of briefly talk about that experience of working on this episode, which was the penultimate episode? 8.
Yeah, I absolutely adored working on this episode. I feel like so often in TV and film, you get dropped into the middle of the scene, and to be able to really start at the very beginning of an interaction with someone and carry it through, sort of like go down this river of a conversation was really, really exciting to play. We would have these really long takes, so it really felt like we could kind of try things, I guess, make the sausage a different way each time. Thanks, Paul. And
But that also you must have felt more power as an actor because you were involved. Like, I feel like I would say this and then you got to say that. Like, you're right, most people don't get that experience in film and television.
yeah, I guess I felt like I had a bit more of a sense of control, which is exciting. I think my biggest challenge in that episode was Brad Simpson, our EP, kept saying, we're making love story, not marriage story. And I was like, okay, well, let's, I want to push it. I want to go to the dark place. Like, what's the lowest they can go? And they're still fighting to make it work. And he said, we're not making a woman under the influence. You're not Jenna Rollins. And I was like, I kid you not, that is my main source of inspiration for this particular episode. So we got a lot of different takes. I think we ended up in the right place. But yeah, I thought it was so exciting to sort of track John and Carolyn through these different moments in their life, because we start the episode and then I think we pick it up 18 months later or 16 months later, so they're in a very different place in their marriage.
Yeah, this episode started with you guys finding out about the death of Princess Diana, which there definitely was a parallel at that time, how the media was treating particularly young women. Paul, what was it like for you? You shot out of a canyon.
Yeah, absolutely.
And here you were like working and having agency over your part. What was that like?
Having the agency to use my own words or what I would infer to be John's words within this episode, and workshopping it and shooting it and doing these incredible long takes. And it was just such a wonderful experience to be in one setting and work with Sarah and the writers and really just hash it out.
But also you guys, what I loved about it was the discipline, because as everybody knows, when you're making a show or a movie, at the end of it, you're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Particularly you two, who are like literally on almost every frame of the show, and yet on the weekends, you would go in and you would work on it and work on it and work on it. And
That's dedication, baby.
It really is. I love that you guys were that. You loved them so much, because that's what I felt when I watched it.
I just don't think there was any other way to do the episode as well, though. I think it was the shortest amount of time we had to shoot an episode. Was it
What did we do, like
6 or 7 days?
days?
something
These
like
are
that?
really long takes.
And then just technically, since we were in this one long apartment, when we were doing these long takes, it was this dance with the camera to make sure that it, could get everything. We weren't, I guess, giving it away that we were making a television show. And it is so nice, like you said, to be at the end of something and to actually have whether or not it's as much time as you want, to be able to have a weekend and a Saturday and a Sunday to just sit and think about it before it's go time. I mean, I feel like I probably speak for everyone when you tend to figure out how to do a scene when you're like in the car home before you can, after you can never go back and do it again. So to be able to just sort of sit with this episode, well, it was also changing. I think it was about 47 pages, and we were getting, like a 17-page scene. Sometimes the night before we were shooting it, because it was such a collaborative process. But by the end of it, when we were filming episode 9, Paul and I sat down together. It's such a sad way to have fun with each other. Where we like sat down and like, can we still recite the entire episode, which we did
Wow.
very quickly.
Very quickly.
Can we still do it?
Oh my gosh. I don't know.
Should we put on a? Yeah, I really. That's looking back on that episode. It felt incredibly creatively fulfilling.
It had an interesting thing, because there's very many ways to do anger, but to do anger with passion as opposed to snarlingness, if that makes any sense. Like, I really felt it, and I was very proud of you, and I thought, I want to tell you it'll never happen again. And I'm joking. I hope it does, because in this business, there's no built-in time for rehearsals or investigation, and we, again, loved you two so much, and we loved what you were doing, and we loved the show, that we really wanted to get that right, and hats off to Brad for supervising that. But this is a clip from our penultimate episode. Hit it. What to do, I know. Thank you for that. It's a fun fact about this episode. I believe it's the only episode that we did that did not end with a needle drop. And I think we had one in there originally. I was like, you can't have Inya after that. You just can't. You can't top what they did. But I love telling that story about how you guys made it. I found it so fascinating and moving, and hats off to you. And then we get to our finale, which was a very interesting thing. And we all know kind of how this story ended, which was hard. I remember I was a younger person when it happened. I was incredibly shocked. I was at a restaurant when the news broke, and people stood up and screamed and ran out of that restaurant. So I had such an indelible moment of that. This was a very interesting episode to do, because we all felt internally that we did not want to lay into the exploitation. So it sort of was about the plane crash, the build up to the plane crash, and then the aftermath, right? The plane crash went through 17 edits, 17 rounds of like, take that out, people don't need to see that, we don't need that line, take it out. The ultimate scene that ends the episode between Gracie and Constance went through one edit. And every line that they did was kept in. There was nothing changed from the moment I saw it to the way that you saw it. So that's kind of how we approached that episode. And it's a very interesting thing, I think, this is for Gracie and Constance. You're both actors who've done incredible things, but this was the show, I believe, and I told you this when we were making it, because I felt that watching it, where people got to say, wow, they can do that? That's amazing. And for actors, I think people don't know this or think about this, but you're only as good as what you're given to do, right? You're at the mercy of something. And I could tell that both of you, when you got these parts, you really worked hard, and I could feel that you were like racehorses let it out of the the barrel to do these incredibly emotional scenes. This being one of my favorite ones that we did. And the fact that it never changed from the moment that you guys shot it, and you were both so powerful that we didn't change a word of it. Like, that never happens on anything that I've had. Usually there's a little tightening or something. Can you talk about, as actors, what that was like to have that role for both of you, where you got to show people what you could do, and you've always been able to do, and what happened when you shot that scene? What was it like? This is at the very end of the episode, when Constance goes over and sees Grace unexpectedly, and they're in John's loft. So can you just talk about my 15 questions that are just thrown at you?
Well, first of all, gave me this opportunity to play this
a formidable, incredibly strong woman who, you know, my goal ultimately was to honor her and to do her justice and to present my interpretation of her at this very specific moment in her life. That scene to me is Caroline. I mean, that whole episode to me is Caroline. It's this woman that will never, ever give up. It's like these waves that just keep crashing on her that will not bring her down. And this sort of wisdom that has been, you know, garnered through unthinkable, unimaginable tragedy that's made her who she is. And that's, I mean, Connor's writing is incredibly, I mean, how do you describe a feeling that you can't describe? And he did that, and he put trust in us to do that. Constance and I knew each other from many years ago, and so there was already this sort of connective tissue between us. And there was time and space to sort of breathe each other in from across the room and to look at each other as two women, two mothers who have lost, you know, Caroline is essentially an orphan and the only living member of her family. And Marie has lost her two children. And I think that I don't know, that's an unthinkable thing. But we were able to see each other and, yeah, breathe each other in. And Anthony gave us all the time in the world to just be there with each other and feel it out and do it.
Was it difficult or liberating to stay in that state for the entire day shooting this?
It was incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I would imagine.
It was, but I feel like at this point in my life, I mean, I was able to tap into that, you know, that well. I think the well for me has deepened over the course of my life. So it was the right time and the right place to become this woman that is very unknowable, and rightfully so.
And how did you feel, Constance, when you shot that scene?
I will be honest that I didn't know how I was going to feel until after we did the first take, because the emotions that were coming out were unlike anything I had expressed in front of anyone before. I mean, even family members or what have you. And sitting across from Grace, when you get an acting partner like that, that is something that you never know you're gonna have until you're in it, right? And when we were there so fully for each other, every emotion, every breath, every line was held. And that made it even more emotional, because it was like, we are in this together. And you're gonna feel what I feel, and I'm gonna feel what you feel, and we're gonna do it again and again and again. And it never left. And that is something I didn't know I was going to feel, because you run out of tears at some point, right? But we never ran out. We never ran out. I mean, I still cry thinking about the scene.
Yeah,
It
it's
still
alive.
makes me
You can feel it.
incredibly, yeah, it's the most raw
Yes.
I've ever let.
And it was also a
myself
heightened
be.
moment, you know, when we were doing the show, because there was another Kennedy tragedy that involved Carolyn Kennedy, and the question was, well, should we do this at all? How should we handle this? But I think the decision of what we did was to show her as someone who had true strength of character and morality and wisdom
Dignity.
and dignity. And we made the decision, and you know, we never know if anybody watches anything, but that's the interesting thing about this show, to end it, like, you know, I said it earlier, you can feel the love, you can feel the kindness, but the attempt to be proper and to be kind. You know, people never know because they don't have these forums where some crazy person moderates them and tells all the secrets, but you know, there were 7, 8, 9 drafts of this script that went on and on and on because we all felt, Connor, Brad, Nina, myself, like, let's keep making it the best we can possibly make it and work on it and not give up on them because we loved everybody. So this is a clip from that episode, our finale, I believe, featuring Grace and Constance. That kind of sums it up, you know, that last line. I think when we were all making it, we all felt, oh, if only they had lived, you know, maybe our world would be a different place today. But thank you to everybody. Thank you to this wonderful cast who I have loved. At the moment we talked to you all, you worked so tirelessly. And it was such a thrill with the show to see it every week double its viewership and get close to 100 million hours viewed. I mean, how does that happen? I have no idea. But it was made with love and it was acted with love. And I think people loved it. And sometimes I love that it came out on Valentine's Day too. But thank you. I think we made our time over here every day.